The barista set the heavy white ceramic mug onto the wooden counter with a soft, hollow thud. The tall man reached out with his right hand, wrapping his long fingers around the curved handle without disturbing the black surface of the freshly poured coffee. He turned from the register with a smooth, unhurried pivot, holding himself with an upright posture that stood out distinctly against the slouching patrons scattered across the room. He navigated the narrow central aisle with quiet efficiency, moving past the small wooden chairs without brushing against a single table or coat sleeve. When he arrived at table 4, he did not hesitate. He pulled the vacant bentwood chair back a few inches, sat down with practiced grace, and settled the ceramic mug squarely onto the round cork coaster. The 16-ounce plastic cup of melted cold brew left behind by the woman in the olive sweater had already been cleared away by the staff, leaving only a faint circular ring of drying moisture on the faux marble surface. From his corner perch at table 7, Miles watched every micro-movement with total, undivided concentration. The earlier frustration that had paralyzed his hands had completely burned away, replaced by an intense analytical vigilance. He leaned forward over his legal pad, keeping his elbows tucked in to steady the wobbly cast-iron pedestal beneath him. The man unbuttoned the cuffs of his dark trench coat, turning the heavy fabric back 2 inches over his wrists to reveal the thick, tight weave of his navy wool sweater. His hands moved with an absolute minimum of wasted motion. Reaching into the interior pocket of his coat, he withdrew a sleek black smartphone and laid it flat on the tabletop, aligning its straight edge parallel with the outer curve of the faux marble bevel. The coffee shop hummed along its familiar late afternoon rhythm. Outside the plate glass window, the cold Brooklyn rain continued its steady assault against the street, sending thick sheets of water cascading down the dark glass and blurring the red taillights of passing delivery vans on 4th Avenue. Inside, the room was warm and humid, holding steady around 70 degrees. The radiator beneath the front window clanked rhythmically, expelling dry heat that carried the rich scent of roasted Colombian coffee and damp outerwear. The stranger lifted his mug, took a slow, measured sip of the scalding black liquid, and placed it back onto the coaster without a single clatter. As his hand left the cup, his left forearm settled onto the tabletop. His index finger began that same distinct rhythmic habit Miles had clocked at the counter, tapping 3 crisp, deliberate beats against the stone, pausing for 3 silent seconds, and repeating the sequence with mechanical regularity. Then, without a sound, the screen of his phone lit up, glowing brightly against the dim light of the cafe. The man did not startle or rush. He picked up the device in one fluid motion, swiped his thumb across the screen, and raised it to his right ear. Miles gripped his graphite pencil, his breath catching in his throat. He strained his ears past the low hiss of the espresso machine and the soft murmur of the acoustic soundtrack drifting from the ceiling speakers. "I'm at the crossing," the man said. His voice was a deep, gravelly baritone, remarkably low, yet carrying a crisp resonance that cut cleanly through the ambient noise. He paused, his hazel eyes fixed steadily on the rain streaming down the storefront window. He listened for several long seconds, his expression completely unreadable. "The envelope was tucked under the ledger, exactly where she said it would be," the man continued, his tone flat, controlled, and devoid of doubt. "The cipher is intact, 2 lines in fresh blue ink." Another pause followed as the unseen speaker on the other end delivered a response. The man's jaw tightened, the sharp muscles along his cheekbone contracting into a rigid line that mirrored the exact tension Miles had seen on the woman's face less than an hour ago. "No," the man said firmly, his voice dropping into a stern, hushed register. "We don't wait for the morning shift. The yardmaster confirmed the midnight freight is running right on schedule. If the marshals pull the shipping manifest at dawn, we lose the window entirely. Keep the north gate unlatched and clear the access road before the coastal fog rolls past the lighthouse." He waited for 3 brief seconds, listening to the final confirmation from the receiver. "Understood," he said simply. With a single tap of his thumb, he ended the call, slid the phone back into his coat pocket, and lifted his coffee mug once more. A sharp shudder of adrenaline traveled straight down Miles's spine. Every scattered clue from the entire afternoon suddenly snapped together in his mind like the interlocking gears of an intricate clockwork machine. The woman's anxious phone call about the crawl space, the missing brass key, the 3.5-inch clearance, the mysterious citation issued on a Monday morning, the note written in blue ink, and now this man's talk of midnight freight trains, unlatched gates, coastal lighthouses, and federal marshals. Whether these people were real conspirators or simply ordinary citizens entangled in a strange domestic errand no longer mattered to Miles. In his mind, they were no longer strangers in a rainy Brooklyn cafe. They had become figures in a sprawling, high-stakes theatrical noir. The cafe around him began to recede into a distant blur. The clatter of ceramic mugs, the hiss of the steam wand, and the smell of roasted beans dissolved into the imaginary darkness of an Atlantic storm. Miles flipped his yellow legal pad to a fresh page, positioned his pencil over the top margin, and let his imagination take complete command of the page. Act I, Scene 2. The storm off the Massachusetts coast has turned the Atlantic into a churning cauldron of black water and white foam. At Pier 17, 40-foot gale-force winds tear through the rigging of rotting fishing trawlers, howling against the corrugated iron walls of the abandoned boatyards. Heavy rain drives horizontally across the docks, mixing with freezing ocean spray that coats the splintered timber boardwalks in a slick glaze. A quarter-mile out in the harbor, the beam of the Cape Ann lighthouse sweeps across the darkness at regular 10-second intervals, its pale light briefly illuminating the churning surf before plunging the coastline back into pitch-black shadow. Valerie Vance moves along the narrow alley behind warehouse number 9, stepping with silent, disciplined precision over discarded mooring lines and rusted iron chains. Her midnight blue trench coat is buttoned tight to her chin, its heavy wool fabric darkened by the downpour. Water cascades from the brim of her dark fedora, but her gaze remains fixed straight ahead, scanning the shadows with the calculating patience of a seasoned operative. Beneath her left arm, she holds her leather dispatch case pressed firmly against her ribs. In her right gloved hand, she grips the cold brass key she retrieved from the tavern table in town. Warehouse number 9 stands on the very edge of the seaward pilings, its weathered cedar siding groaning under the pressure of the gale. The massive sliding timber doors at the front loading dock are secured by a thick anchor chain and a padlock coated in rust. Valerie does not approach the main entrance. She knows the layout of these coastal depots intimately. Skirting the western foundation wall, where the timber overhang creates a pocket of deep shadow, she drops to one knee in the wet gravel beside the seaward deck. Beneath the deck lies a low, pitch-black crawl space, measuring barely 3 feet in vertical clearance between the damp stone foundation and the heavy hemlock floor joists above. Below the joists, the Atlantic tide surges violently against the pilings, sending cold spray up through the gaps in the timber floorboards. The roar of the water is deafening, echoing beneath the structure like rolling thunder. Valerie extracts a slim brass penlight from her pocket and clicks the switch. A concentrated circle of white light cuts through the darkness beneath the building. The light reveals rows of thick wooden pilings crusted with barnacles and salt stains. 3 yards inward, resting on a bed of crushed oyster shells and sea drift just above the high tide line, sits an antique sea chest bound with wrought iron straps. The brass lock plate is tarnished green with verdigris, but the keyhole itself is clean and dark, glistening with a fresh coat of mineral oil. Exactly where she said, Valerie murmurs into the collar of her coat. She lies flat on her side in the wet gravel and pulls herself into the narrow crawl space. The sharp oyster shells bite through the heavy wool of her trousers, and the damp ocean mud soaks into her sleeves, but she moves forward without a pause. Reaching the chest, she fits the brass key into the lock. She turns it clockwise. The internal tumblers engage with a heavy, satisfying click that cuts through the roar of the surf. Valerie lifts the heavy iron-reinforced lid. Inside, nestled within several layers of oilcloth to protect against the salt air, lies a thick, leather-bound shipping ledger from the Boston Maritime Exchange, accompanied by a bundle of telegraph rolls tied with red twine. Tucked beneath the leather strap of the ledger is a folded scrap of paper inscribed with 2 lines of bold, saturated blue ink. Valerie unfolds the paper under the beam of her penlight. Manifest altered at dawn. The iron trunk is secured in Boxcar 42 on the midnight freight to Boston. North Gate is open. Before she can slide the ledger into her dispatch case, the sharp glare of an electric searchlight sweeps across the gravel outside, its beam flashing violently through the cracks between the floorboards above her head. The heavy crunch of work boots on wet gravel echoes just outside the foundation wall. 2 men halt directly beside the crawlspace entrance, their voices rising over the howling wind. "The lock on the alley gate was cut," a harsh voice shouts. "Check the seaward deck. The harbor master said Vance was seen leaving the tavern 15 minutes ago." "She can't get past the rail spur," a second voice responds, followed by the metallic click of a heavy revolver hammer being pulled back. "The federal marshals have 3 squad cars blocking the harbor road from here to the bridge. If she's anywhere near this pier, she's boxed in." Valerie instantly clicks off her penlight, plunging herself into total darkness. She lies motionless against the cold gravel, pressing her body flat against the damp earth beneath the hemlock joists. Above her, the searchlight sweeps back and forth, casting long, moving slats of white light across the joists. The boots of the 2 men creak heavily across the timber deck directly over her head, vibrating through the wood and raining down fine specks of dry salt and sawdust onto her shoulders. She controls her respiration, taking slow, shallow breaths through her nose, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat to the thunderous crash of the ocean waves breaking against the outer seawall. The 2 men linger at the edge of the pier for 20 agonizing seconds, their flashlights probing the black water below. Finding nothing, they turn back toward the front of the warehouse, their footsteps fading into the roar of the gale. Valerie wastes not a single second. She secures the ledger, the telegraph tapes, and the blue ink cipher into her dispatch case, strapping the brass buckles shut with practiced speed. She backs out of the crawl space on her hands and knees, keeping her silhouette low against the dark foundation stones. Slipping through the shadow of the overhang, she darts across the open gravel path and ducks behind a line of rusted iron shipping containers stacked alongside the private rail siding. Half a mile to the north, piercing through the driving rain and the heavy coastal mist, the deep, mournful wail of a steam locomotive whistle echoes across the marshes. The midnight freight has cleared the junction. Valerie pulls back the wet cuff of her coat and checks the luminous dial of her field watch. 11:48. She has 12 minutes to cross the rail yard, evade the federal cordon surrounding the perimeter, and reach Boxcar 42 before the engine gathers momentum for the long journey north toward Boston. She adjusts the strap of her dispatch case across her shoulder, pulls her fedora down against the biting wind, and breaks into a silent, determined sprint toward the glowing lanterns of the rail yard. Miles lifted his pencil from the legal pad, his fingers throbbing with a pleasant, dull ache. He had filled 4 entire sheets of yellow paper with tight, unbroken script. He looked up, blinking as the reality of the coffee shop reasserted itself around him. The cafe was quiet, wrapped in the warm, dry air of late afternoon. The commercial espresso machine let out a final, gentle hiss of steam as the barista wiped down the counter. The ambient jazz from the speakers had shifted to a slow, muted saxophone ballad. Outside, the downpour had softened to a steady, rhythmic drizzle, dripping peacefully from the edge of the green canvas awning. Across the aisle at table 4, the man in the charcoal coat sat in quiet contemplation. His white ceramic mug was empty, sitting neatly on the center of the cork coaster. He rested his hands loosely on his lap, looking out through the rain-streaked window toward the distant street lamps beginning to flicker alive along 4th Avenue. Miles sat back against the wooden chair, a deep, genuine sense of fulfillment settling in his chest. The artistic fog, the paralyzing self-criticism, and the suffocating lists of mechanical measurements that had plagued him all afternoon were completely gone. In their place remained a living, breathing story, born from the mundane mystery of an ordinary room, yet carrying all the dramatic weight and momentum of a true stage thriller. He tapped the bottom edge of his notepad against the tabletop, aligning the 4 fresh pages with neat precision. He reached for his paper cup, took a long, warming sip of black coffee, and smiled faintly. The play was only beginning, and for the first time in months, Miles could not wait to write the next act.